Good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Shed Project. For today's stuff, we are going to be looking at how you would build this shed in real life, just a few facts about the way that you would put it together, and we're going to try and get through the short walls and the door framing. And last day we talked about how forces push down on the studs, and when you put a window, you cut a couple of the studs out. So those studs are kind of, in order to get that taken care of, you add a header and two trimmer studs. Today we're going to frame a door if we get to it, and it's basically the same thing as a window in that you have a header and two trimmer studs, but there's just no cripple studs and no sill halfway up the framing there. So I mentioned the width of headers in a wide opening last period, and just to touch on that again, because I think I did a kind of a quick job of it. The wider the opening, the wider the header. This is what I mean. You can see this is a big wide opening, and this piece of wood that he's got in there to support that is really big and beefy. It's really wide this way. It's probably a 2 by 12, and so the way that you know how wide it needs to be is either you're given a plan by an architect or it would be in a table in the building code. You don't have to worry about that at all this year. Just kind of I just wanted to clear that up if I made it difficult. Now, real world building. I would say when I've done this in the past, the easiest way is to build that wall lying down on the floor, attach the siding to it, and then lift it into place. Okay, like what these guys are doing here. You can see they've already got this left wall lifted into place, and it has a brace on it to stop it from wobbling around, right? You can also see that their headers are sort of a completely different configuration than what we have modeled. And that's sometimes, I guess the way to put this is that our model that we're building here, you could build this in the real world and it would be nice and sturdy, but it's not necessarily the only way that there is to build a shed, and it's not 100% for certain the correct way. This is not necessarily wrong. You can see also this little bit of siding here sticking down over the edge of the plywood, like we had like we've got modeled. Well, we don't have our siding modeled yet, but it will be over the edge of that plywood and onto the joist. You can see that the way that it looks over here on this right hand side as well. We'll be talking about the advantages of putting the siding on first. And one of the advantages of siding is that it does help to stop the wall from bending over like that. And we'll have a quick look at that. So we'll just start off by pointing out I made up this little model of a house real quick. And if you can imagine this house, there's going to be all kinds of forces on it over the years. For one thing, there's going to be wind, which over 20, 30 years, it's going to start to sort of affect the house, maybe bend it that way. If it blows from the other direction, there's gonna be a lot of movement over the years. Maybe dad runs the lawnmower into it, or people are hanging things on it. Maybe there's even an earthquake. Uh, the stud walls generally are not strong enough by themselves to stop the wall from moving back and forth like this. Okay, so one of the things that the siding does is that when you put the siding on there, that will, all the rows of nails that are going to be all along the top plates and all along those studs and along these studs here that are on 16-inch centers, that siding and all those nails will help to hold that wall nice and stiff. Now, what I want to say, point about siding and sheets of plywood when you buy it, usually you can assume, in fact, I've never seen a piece of plywood that is not square and that doesn't have all its edges straight. When it comes from the factory, their machines are accurate enough that it's always perfect. Now, I can't say that 100% for certain in all cases. You may, at some point in your life, find a sheet of plywood that's not square, but I've never seen one. So, having said that, if you were to build your wall and it was to be a little bit out of center like that, right? The wall could, when you put the siding on it, you're going to notice that right away, okay? So Once you put that siding on there, that'll give you the opportunity, if you've built your wall and somehow it's come out that it's not square, you'll notice that, and that will give you the ability to turn it back straight again, to take some action to correct that and put the wall back straight. And you'll be able to see that when you look right at the one of the corners here. Like I said, that sheet of plywood is always 100% square, and you'll be able to see that on that corner. Okay, so the things that we were saying here, the siding is going to help prevent it from the wind going and turning it sort of back and forth like that and like that over the years, and the screws in the top and bottom of the studs coming loose, and it's going to hold things nice and straight. By the time you get all of the sheets of plywood on there and they're all stuck tight together and they've all got their nails and screws all installed, it's going to be very strong, and it's really not very likely to go sideways on you at all. Moving on to building the shed. We're going to build this back wall today, and I think that's all we're really going to have time for in this video. We might have time to move it up to the front. So we'll need a bottom plate. We have one bottom plate that runs along the long edge of the shed, and we're going to build a bottom plate that runs along this edge of the shed. So I'm going to start on that corner, and I'm going to pull my rectangle up along this edge, and I'm going to say 3.5, comma 1.5, and there's my rectangle, and I will pull that out until I get to this edge right here. And we will make that a component. And I've already selected my color to color it, so I can now, that is our bottom plate. The top plate is the exact same thing, so I can get it right by that corner, and I can move that up to the top. And I need to be a little closer to really see what I've got here. There we go. Oh, it didn't click in. There it is. Okay. Something must have went a little funny with my mouse there. So now we need the studs, and we can start our stud right in this corner here. We will do a rectangle, and once again we will do 3.5. Sorry, we will do 1.5, comma 3.5. And I keep hitting wrong buttons. And we'll pull that up to the bottom of that, top plate. So we're going up there, and we get right up to the bottom of that top plate. Why won't it click on there? Okay. We need to make that a component and color it. And I guess I did it in reverse order there. Hopefully it's, yeah, it'll be all colored. That's fine. So now we've got our stud made, and we need, I'm just going to hide Dr. Temple Grandin here. We'll bring her back later. She's all right. We need to move that. We need one on each edge here. So we'll grab that stud by that very corner right there, and hit Control to duplicate it, move it over. We're going to need one, because this shed is 8 feet wide and our sheets of plywood, our sheets of siding are 4 feet wide. We can put one stud right exactly in the middle, and it will all make sense in the end. So we come down here, and we're going to move this stud, but we're going to try and grab it by the exact midpoint. So I've got it. It says midpoint in component 4. I hit Control to duplicate it, and all I have to really do is find the midpoint of this component here, because the whole thing is symmetrical. There. Now, if I take my tape measure tool, if I want to double check, I can measure from here to the midpoint of that component, and it should say 4 feet. Beautiful. So that's good. And now we just have to duplicate that stud so that we've got one every 16 inches on this back wall. So we will select it, and we will do a move, and we will get onto the red axis, and we'll, make sure you stay on the red axis when you let go of your mouse. That can be tricky. And we will do 16, enter, and we'll do to do two of them, we will do X2, and that's the two studs that we need. Same thing going in the other direction, the exact same thing. We select that stud, which I guess I would have had it already selected, maybe, I'm not sure. But we'll get it moving off on the red axis and hit control to make sure we're duplicating it. 16, enter, X2, enter, and that is all the studs and plates that are in that wall. So the next best thing we can do here is to just duplicate that wall onto the front, and later we will use that wall to build the door into. So if you select all of those studs and that top plate, and see, you have to be careful because I'm selecting a bunch of stuff that I actually don't want here. In fact, maybe the simplest thing for me to do here is to get turned sideways to this, and then to get all of those studs and just hide them so that they are not kind of in my way as I'm working here. So I want to duplicate all of these studs, and I can, okay, I will hide these as well. You can either hide them or you can just keep in mind that that's not part of what you're working on. But you want to get all of these studs, and you want to get this bottom plate, and I guess I should point out what I mean by that. These two studs are actually part of the long walls, okay? So you don't want to change them. They stay with the long walls. So I'm going to hide them just so that they're not sort of getting mixed up with what we're doing right now. Select all the studs that are part of the short wall and the bottom plate that's part of the short wall. You can grab it by that very corner right. Get it by right there. Then hit control so you're duplicating it. Zoom yourself into this wall here, and you can put it right there. And that is the front and back walls done. You kind of need a door to get into a building, right? So we will add that next day. Oops. Unhide. I'm just unhide everything before you finish so that you can make sure everything's okay. Unhide all. We've got everything done, and we just need to work on the framing for this door, and then we can start the roof. So we're going to be done our shed before too long, at least as far as the framing goes, and we'll start putting the siding and the actual plywood on the roof.